Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar on planning for customer success. My name is Richard Knight, and I run Insight 6 with my wife Lucy, and we work with a number of different clients looking at full customer experience, and one of those key parts of that is planning for success. The webinar is being recorded, and the link will be provided for you after the session. So for those people who had signed up for it but unfortunately can't make it today, well, I'll be sending that on to them as well. If you would like to ask any questions at all, please do come off mute and ask away, or use the chat function if you would like to do so. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, one of the key things that we've got to be thinking about at this particular interesting period in our business lives is about keeping the customer at the heart of everything that we do, and planning with the customer in mind. What you've learned is what we're going to be looking at, or are learning, during change, and how you and your business have responded to what you've learned as well. So we're going to run you through a few different ideas and little sessions that you may want to use within your business or with yourselves to really understand what's going on from a customer point of view, and also plan for the future, and then think about what is next. So that's what we're going to be doing in this 30-minute session. I will be talking for probably 20 to 25 minutes, and then enabling some time for questions if required. Just to make sure that I know that everybody can hear me, is it possible for somebody just to type in the chat function, just to make sure that's all working, just to say hello? That would be great, thank you. Just to make sure everything is as is. Good, brilliant, that's great, excellent. Also, just to make you aware that if people do turn up a little bit late, I will let them in as well. So if I do go a little bit quiet, just trying to find the admit button for those people who might be a bit late. So moving forward, why customer experience? And if you are on this particular call, or you're listening to this webinar, you have a better idea about why customer experience than those people who aren't here. You're here today to and so you recognize and understand the importance of that customer experience. According to Forbes magazine, 89% of businesses compete primarily on the basis of customer experience. And that's up from 36% in 2010, which you would presume would happen. But while 80% of companies believe they deliver superior experiences, only 8% of the customers agree with them. In other words, companies have a long way to go. And what that means is there is tremendous opportunity to disrupt a competitor or gain market share. Everything a brand does, the way what it does, its marketing, research, advertising, and more, all play a role in shaping the customer's experience. So focusing on customer experience may be the single most important investment a brand can make in today's competitive business climate. And we'll be talking a lot around how that has been impacted by the amount of change that we've had recently, which is interesting because change is the only constant. And as the president of Canada said, Justin Trudeau said, it's actually the fastest it's ever been, but it will be getting faster and faster. So we have to think about that when it comes to our customers. The customers are now redefining the way in which they engage with brands. If you think about where you've been over the time that we've had during the last couple of years, and everything that's now happening, we are, as customers, thinking about things in slightly different ways. So our requirements, our needs and wants are changing. Before the pandemic, 59% of global customers felt companies had lost touch with the human element of customer experience. So even before all of those things that were going on in the last 2 years, people were seeing that there has been this little bit of a change. So that has had quite an impact in the way customers view business. On top of that, 75% of customers prefer to interact with a human versus an automated machine. So again, going back to behaviors and the way we work as human beings, it's really interesting to note that we're still looking for that. Yes, tech can make a difference, and it can make a difference for those customer experiences. But actually, from a human point of view, it's still very relevant to speak to people and interact with other humans. The need to link to financial data in business as well. So this is one of the key things that we're finding is that, customer experience, customer service has always been spoken about. It's always been around. It's nothing new. However, the fact that businesses need to understand, if they put the effort in, what is that impact on the business data? What is the impact on the financials on the bottom line? And that's where businesses are now looking at how they can improve those revenues, is by looking at customer experience as well. And how has customer experience changed due to COVID? Might be thinking that it's a word that we don't need to use too much, but it's still around and it will have quite an impact, I think, going forward, and it always will have an impact, because there is that trust and convenience element which has been driven by the fact that we've been locked away. The idea that we want to be able to trust people, that things are not quite as they seemed in the past. We need that trust in organizations, in business. And also, we have been getting very much used to the businesses being convenient for us as customers. We can order one thing today, it'll arrive tomorrow. So customer experience comes down to three things when we think about it. Nice and simple. Making it effortless to do business with customers. Ensure the customer has a positive emotional connection to the brand. And prove customer value. So when we look at those three, actually, nice and simple, easy, we should all be doing it. All businesses should be able to do that, making stuff effortless, focusing on that emotional connection, and then proving the value to the customer as well. But it's obviously not as easy as it may sound, as a lot of organizations are still way off the mark. So in today's session, we're going to be thinking about those and how we can start planning for those three aspects of customer experience to be focused on in your business or any business that you may be working with. So where do we start? Well, there's three main components to this session today in terms of planning for customer success. And typically, a lot of organizations find themselves planning in paralysis. There is so much to do. Where do they start? I can't possibly stop and think about what our customers need, want in now and in the future, because we've got too much to do. And that has been very evident over lockdown. If we think about certain areas, certain sectors, legal, professional services, very busy, people making the most of being away from their businesses, being at home and actually calling upon them. So they're very, very busy, but actually how much is this stopping them focusing on what really matters for their customers? So a simple and structured approach may be beneficial in unlocking your thinking. So this first image is thinking about reflecting. Reflect. So think about what you have learned and are still learning. That's the first phase. Then the business has to review, consider any changes that have been made during the crisis or during the last 2 years, whether there's a crisis or not, this is an ongoing thing, and the impact on the experience that your customers have had with your product or service, the experience that your team has working within your organization, and the way you behave as a leader, or the way the leaders behave if it's not you directly. And the final phase of this planning is revise. So identify and prioritize areas of opportunity, reshape business plans with the customer at the center. So 3 phases of this session that we're going to be looking at today. And we'll give you some practical ideas and some worksheets that we will provide for those who would like them to actually be able to run such a session within an organization. Now, hopefully today you'll get an idea about how we can plan for that customer success. So moving on. So in the reflection phase, this is something that happens a lot actually, and people probably don't recognize it because we do it in very much of an informal way. We reflect on our customers on a daily basis. We reflect on our team and we reflect internally. but that may well be much more of an informal approach. So the question, what have you learned and how have you learned it, is something we don't formally ask ourselves, but as humans, we're continually reflecting on what has passed. So are your learnings based on assumptions and hunches, or do you have evidence? That's one of the key things that we're thinking about here. What methods have you used to gather this information, this insight to reflect on? Are they surveys, mystery visits, mystery inquiries, focus groups, or even just speaking to people to gather information? How has that worked for you? Think about everything you've learned about your customers, your team, and yourself as a leader. There are so many areas to consider, so we have included a few key topics as a starter. So you can expand this sort of exercise way beyond the 3 headings we got here and beyond the subheadings that I'll show you shortly. But this is hopefully something that will get you started to think about, okay, what's the formality and how do we actually drive this planning process? So in terms of the customer, we can be thinking about the loyalty, expectations, needs, motivations, communication, adaptability, and feelings. For the team, the sort of things that we're looking for around, or learnings around, are engagement, resilience, sensitivity, motivation again, communication, collaboration, adaptability, loyalty. So what have you learned about those things? And resilience for myself as a leader, or you in the business. What have you learned about your resilience, your sensitivity, your agility, your focus, communication, collaboration, creativity, and adaptability? So a lot to be thinking about. So in terms of all of that, it seems like quite a big exercise to run through, but what we would suggest, and what part of the sessions that we run include, are a reflection exercise. So this can be done in several ways. On today's exercise, I was looking at running this through the chat function. So if we're running a web or online, you can ask people to provide their thoughts through the chat function, or you can do this in groups, in breakout rooms, or you can actually provide this in face-to-face sessions. So what have you learned about your customers? So that's the first question. And we would ask that same question about what have you learned about your team? What about you've learned about yourself? You then ask them to consider the following headings, and you can add or take ones away depending on what you're looking for. And you can start to think about what the impact is or what the learnings are. And we can actually get this written down so that you have the evidence rather than just be based on hunches. So this is the first port of call. What do we think, what we've learned over the last 2 years, 3 years? And then there's also an opportunity to put this onto one of our worksheets. What have I learned? Am I learning about my customers in terms of, and we've put all those different headings into these bubbles. The idea of this is that you give your teams and yourself and your colleagues 10 minutes in silence to write down all they can for these particular headings. What have we learned? And this is the sort of sheet that you might come up with. The loyalty, it was varied according to this particular one. There's lots of people telling their friends and family about how good we were. The needs for my customers have become more and more complex. Adaptability, age doesn't always drive this. Okay, so all these different things can be put down, and that's a great exercise to be run on each of those headings to really understand and formalize in words what you think you have learned over the last couple of years. Once we've done that session, it's about then reviewing. So we've got information, we've got learnings, we've got things that are going on. What do we then do? What can we think about in terms of reviewing what we have actually got in place? So this particular worksheet would be looking at listing the changes you've made over the last couple of years, and actually how they relate to people or process. So having made the changes, it's really important to understand the impact they might have had. We do this by reviewing the benefits to the customer and the business, the cost to the business, and the level of effort. Involve different members of the team or departments to ensure there is a balanced view of the effort, cost, and benefits. Base the customer benefits on evidence and feedback gathered. Avoid assumptions wherever possible. So we can take our learnings, but we can take other evidence that's available. And the idea is to consider the changes that have been made across any areas of the business, and consider the changes that may be felt or seen by customers and or internal team members. The overall score will give you an indication of which changes are making the biggest difference. The higher the score, the better. This leads us to revise. This will then lead us onto the revise stage, where we can think about the next steps. But if we then think about how this form would practically work, we look at something like listing our changes here, scoring them on the benefits, effort and cost, and calculate the priority. So that means that we're getting a prioritized list going here. Because there is so much that has been going on, so many changes that may well have been made, we need to understand the benefit to the customer, the benefit to the business, and that effort and cost. Because when we start to understand those, we can then make focused and targeted decisions about where we go next. So that form basically runs in a very simple priority calculation. It's an average benefit divided by the effort plus the cost gives you a priority. And in terms of this example, we can see that step 1, 2, and 3 will give you the 2.5 priority. You can then have a number of priorities underneath and work out which ones you think you should be looking at going forward. And that's where we move on to the next section. So in terms of revision or revising what we're doing, actually making further changes, we need to be thinking about 3 areas within that. We're taking that priority score will give us an indication of the value of each of the changes. It's a thought provoker, not an exact science. So we take that and put this into these next 3 areas. And helps us add a bit of structure in terms of, do we scale, do we maintain, or do we scrap various changes or processes or behaviors within an organization? So we need to make decisions based on the revised section. We can do this through a very simple revised action planning template. And this will ensure that from your priority list, you can understand what is the key enabler. Is it people or process? When it comes to people, is it skills or motivation? And when it comes to process, is it the ways of working or technology? So we need to clarify those 2 areas. There's also a need to think about who will be involved and how and by when these additional or next steps will be taken and by who. So the changes that you identified may have made out of a necessity, but which will enable you to improve your customer experience in the longer term. What are the enablers? And this worksheet will help you to capture the initial actions that you can take, even if that is only planning in review time. And then you need to be considering the scale, how you can make it, if it's a real priority, how we're going to scale it, how are we going to improve it, and make sure that the customers are benefiting from it. If there is a priority or one of the 3 priorities that you want to maintain, is there enough resource to be able to maintain that? And how are we communicating that? And then similarly, in terms of communication, if we're scrapping anything within our processes for our customers, how do we communicate that? And how do we do away with that particular process or skill or technology? Because we might need to change. So therefore, we've got to consider all of these areas. So remember, this worksheet is based on all of those, on all that reviewing that you've done in terms of the changes you have made. Have they made a difference? Which ones are the priorities? And now do you scale, maintain, or scrap? So those three areas: reflect, review, revise. We need to take time to do this. Remember, getting caught up in the day-to-day means that you cannot think about the future and what your customers need and want, and therefore adjust your offering to suit, because that will impact loyalty, the amount your customers spend with you, and the amount of time they spend telling others how great you are. So in terms of Insight 6 or other providers that may be able to assist you, reflection, how could we help with that? So there's customer surveys, there's team surveys, mystery visits, inquiries, focus groups, and mapping of motivation of your internal teams. When you then review the situation, when you're looking at what changes you've made and whether they've been of impact, we can think about customer journey mapping, additional surveys. There's also mentoring and coaching that we offer. And also the revise stage, mystery visits once again, make sure things are working. Continue those surveys, training and development if there's new ways, new skills that are required, continual coaching to ensure that people are maintaining the focus on behaviors. And once again, how is the motivation when you've made these changes? Let's map those again. So Insight 6 are there to support you with all of those things. And in terms of your next steps, or our next steps for you, we are going to send you out some summary of the 3 planning stages. If you would like those, please do let me know via the chat, or on if you're listening to this at a later date, email me or message me on LinkedIn or the other platforms that you are viewing this through. And we will also then send you worksheets that we have shown you so that you can use those within your organization. And we will also be sending out a feedback request to you for those people who are watching this to see whether this has been of use. We are an experienced organization ourselves, and it would be rather remiss of us to avoid asking feedback. So we would love to understand whether this short session is of use. If it is, what else we can possibly do for you in the future. Also, don't forget that my good self and Ryan Huxtable also produce the CX podcast R&R on YouTube, Apple Music and Spotify every month. Episode 56, Scary CX, is out now. So if you search that up, you can listen to us warble from the West Country about all things customer experience. Thank you ever so much for your time, and I hope you found this of use. My name is Richard Knight. I can be contacted on those details on the screen now. Have a great day, and I hope the rest of your week goes well. Thank you very much.